1:51 in the morning. A control room near Austin starts a 9-minute countdown to statewide collapse. Why is Texas the only state in America running on its own power grid? And in 2021, that answer decided whether your lights stayed on or whether you froze in your own bed. That night, Texas came within 4 minutes and 37 seconds of losing power. Not for hours, for weeks. And everyone blamed the weather. But the same storm hit Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, and their lights mostly stayed on. Stranger still, one city in Texas kept its lights on too. Because that city, quietly, is not on the Texas grid at all. To understand how that's possible, you have to go back to 1935, to a handshake. In 1935, Franklin Roosevelt signed the Federal Power Act. From that day, any electricity crossing a state line belonged to federal regulators. Texas utility men read those words very carefully. And they found the loophole hiding in plain sight. Power that never leaves Texas can never be interstate. So, they made a pact. Not one electron under their control crosses the border. Ever. They even put it in writing, binding themselves to stay inside the state. And if you've ever flipped a light switch in Dallas, Houston, or Austin, you've lived inside that pact. Understand how strange this is. Texas is stitched into America by road, by rail, by pipeline, by everything. Electricity for the companies powering the heart of Texas is the one thing that stops at the border. On purpose, a legal firewall, drawn in copper wire. The pact worked for 30 years, but in 1965, the Northeast went dark. 30 million people, the worst blackout America had ever seen. Washington wanted national reliability rules with teeth. Texas's answer was to build its own referee. In 1970, the utilities formed ERCOT, the Electric Reliability Council of Texas. The message to Washington: we police ourselves. So that's why the island exists, to stay out of reach. But the real question is how it survived. Because in 1976, one of its own tried to sink it from the inside. Vernon, Texas, May 4th, 1976. A quiet substation on the edge of a ranching town near the Oklahoma border. The company behind what happened that night was Central and Southwest, a holding company that owned 4 utilities, 2 in Texas, 2 across the line in Oklahoma. And it had a problem. An old federal rule said a holding company's utilities had to run as one integrated system, or the company could be broken apart. Its Texas half and its Oklahoma half were forbidden from touching. Lawsuits were already circling, so the company decided that if the wall would not come down on its own, it would knock a hole in it. Just after midnight, operators at its West Texas subsidiary closed a circuit at Vernon and threw a line of Texas electricity across the Red River into Altus, Oklahoma. That was the whole weapon. The moment Texas power touched Oklahoma, the argument went, every company wired into the Texas grid was suddenly in interstate commerce. 40 years of independence, void. One switch. They call it the midnight connection. Almost nobody was warned. The rest of Texas's utilities went to bed independent and woke up inside interstate commerce. And this is the part that breaks my brain. When Houston Lighting and Power and Texas Electric Service found out, they didn't reach for their lawyers first. They reached for the breakers. As soon as their executives learned of the trade, they ordered their own equipment physically cut loose from the Texas grid. They carved the state's grid apart with their own hands, rather than be regulated against their will. Cutting the wires stopped the electricity. It couldn't stop the lawyers. A cascade of lawsuits and federal filings ran on into the 1980s, all circling one question: is the island legal? The answer they landed on is so strange it's still running today. The answer was an airlock. At a handful of points on the border, Texas power is converted from alternating current to direct current, then back again on the other side. Power gets through. Because federal law captures grids that synchronize, flowing freely into each other. A DC tie never synchronizes. Texas can trade electricity with America without ever legally touching America. So the island survived, upgraded from a handshake to a loophole in physics. And for 45 more years, it held, until the wind shifted and the bill for 1935 finally arrived. February 2021. Winter Storm Uri parks the coldest air in decades on top of Texas and keeps it there for days. Gas wellheads freeze solid. Power plants that were never winterized trip offline, one after another. Demand explodes just as supply collapses. Any other state could now lean on its neighbors. The neighbors were strained too, but they had power to spare, and two of the largest machines on Earth were sitting right there. But Texas couldn't take it. The island has no bridges, just those few thin DC ties, a rounding error against what was needed that night. By 1:20 that morning, February 15th, operators were already cutting neighborhoods off. Then at 1:51, the frequency fell below its safety threshold anyway. That control room from the start of this video, this is it. Past that line, there's a rule. 9 minutes. Stay below it that long, and generators start ripping themselves offline automatically to save themselves, cascading toward total collapse. A dead grid can't just be switched back on. A full black start could take weeks, possibly months. A modern state with no electricity for a month is not an outage. It's a different century. So the operators cut deeper. In the end, 20,000 megawatts of forced blackouts. The largest manually ordered blackout in American history. 4.5 million homes and businesses went dark in the coldest week in living memory. When the frequency finally climbed back over the line, there were 4 minutes and 37 seconds left on the 9-minute clock. That was the whole margin. That's how close Texas came to weeks in the dark. The official count is 246 people dead. Independent analyses say the real number is likely higher. Hypothermia in bedrooms, carbon monoxide from families running cars in garages for warmth. And the Texas city whose lights stayed on? El Paso. El Paso sits at the far western tip of the state, wired into the western interconnection, outside ERCOT entirely. And after a freeze in 2011, it spent millions winterizing its plants. That week, about 3,000 El Paso homes lost power. Most got it back within 5 minutes. Same state, same storm, different grid, different world. Now, here's the part nobody expected. After 2021, you'd think the lesson was, connect. Instead, the island is booming. AI data centers are stampeding into Texas right now. And one of the biggest draws is precisely that the grid is independent. One less regulator, faster to plug in. ERCOT's own forecast says demand could roughly quadruple by 2032, driven overwhelmingly by data centers. A number so wild, even ERCOT warns it's probably inflated. But even half of it would remake the island. The island that nearly sank is being loaded with the heaviest cargo in the country. So, this was never really a story about electricity. It's about the oldest trade there is, independence or help. Texas chose in 1935. It paid in 2021. And it's doubling down right now. Turns out the Texas grid was never just built to keep the lights on. It was built to keep the government out. And it does both, right up until the night it can't. In the early 1900s, one man claimed a patent on the automobile itself, and a cartel of carmakers taxed nearly every car built in America, until a stubborn mechanic named Henry Ford fought them all the way to the end. That story's next. Subscribe so you don't miss it.